some bone broth, and you can see the fat. You can see the fat has kind of risen to the top. So I'm going to strain that, scoop it, clean it out, and I've got my jars ready here. I'm gonna cold process it. I'm going to use heat to process it, but I'm going to cold pack the jars, and that is the broth is cold, the canner is cold. So I've got my canner, my jars, my lids and rings, my broth, vinegar, and a bowl to scoop some of those bones into. And okay, so here's how I do this. We like to can our broth into, our beef broth into pint-sized jars. That just seems to be how much we use at a time. It's easy. I like to drink it just plain, so when I do that, I don't want any more than a pint. Also, it's like nice and gelatinous, and so to get the most bang for our buck, I cut it in half with water. So I'm only going to fill it about that much, and this is straining. It's straining slowly. It's full of stuff, and that's okay. And then I will top this jar with water, and I'll do the same with all the rest. So this is actually going to go twice as far as I need it to. Here's all the stuff that I pulled out. Bones. I like to add carrots, celery, onions, garlic, shallots if I have them, that kind of, some salt and pepper, and some apple cider vinegar. So I'm going to get to work. All right, so I am filling jars. They're about a third of the way filled with beef bone broth, and then I'm topping them off with water. I'm using my faucet water. I have no problem with that. We have a well, and all of this is going into the pressure canner where it will boil at super high temps anyways, so it's good. I'm gonna keep going. So that's 14 pint-sized jars. My canner will hold 7 quarts or 14 pints, and we're doing these in pints. So you can see I have filled these to this bottom lip, or this first rung on the jar, and that gives it a 1-inch headspace. So next I'm going to add some salt. Okay, so this is Redmond's Real Salt. I bought it in a 25-pound bag through a co-op order, and I'm storing it in these 1-gallon glass jars. I'm going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon for each jar. Salt is not necessary, but I prefer it. Sometimes if I need a quick pick-me-up, I like to just crack open one of these jars to drink as part of a meal or a snack, and if I don't have to salt it then that's that much better. Okay, so my jars are filled. I've added salt. The next thing I need to do is to clean the rims. You can use a clean cloth with a little vinegar. I'm just gonna grab a paper towel. All right, just a little bit of plain white vinegar will do the job. It'll just cut the grease and the fat that's on the rims. All right, so the reason you want to do that is because I'm using new lids. These are just ball canning lids. These are regular mouth jars and the lids that match. So you can see the rubber gasket that comes on there. If there is grease and fat or anything like a granule of salt or anything on there, it'll prevent that rubber gasket from properly sealing. So I'm just going to set all these down. These don't have to be heated. Oftentimes I still heat them. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm old school, but I'm trying to let go of that. And then rings, you can certainly reuse your rings. I always reuse rings. I keep them as long as I can until they are rusty. So you can see when I put these on, not I'm not really cranking them down. I'm just putting them on finger tight. You really don't want to put too much pressure on them. They will lift a little bit in the canner as pressure releases, and that's a normal part of the process. That's a good thing. And so, yeah, just don't push too hard. You just easily slip them on. I need to get 2 more rings. All right, last one, so you can see how I put it on in real time. That's it. All right, this is my canner. I've got about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of water in the bottom, and a rack. You want to make sure that you have a rack in the bottom so that the bottoms of your jars do not get direct heat with the bottom of the pot. I'm going to put in a splash of white vinegar. That was probably more than I needed. Reason that we do that is there's a cloudiness that kind of comes about out of, we have very hard water, and that'll stick to the jar. It'll also help degrease the jars, the outsides of the jars, as it cans. So, actually I think this holds 16 pints, but I've got 14, so I'm going to space them evenly. So there's 7, and then I've got a dividing rack to go on top of that for the next 7. So you'll see the tops, well, they'll bend up and down. There you go. When they are finished, that should not happen. All right. When you start your canner, you want to make sure this, I'm using the All-American canner. So it has a weight and a dial gauge on here, but you want to make sure that your weight is not on. Make sure that my lid is as even as possible. And then it's got these awesome wing nuts. I'm going to go ahead and start it. Broth is one of the easier things to get started in pressure canning. If you're afraid to use a pressure canner, broth is probably the easiest. First thing I think I pressure canned, I did a test batch with some water, and then I did green beans, and that was also easy. It's all really easy. So I'm gonna make sure these are all nice and tight. And now we wait. So I'm waiting for the temperature to come up and the pressure to come up here. But before that happens, this little nozzle is gonna let steam escape, and when I can see a constant rise of steam coming out of that, I'll go ahead and put my weight on. For our altitude, we're basically at sea level here in Florida. It's 10 pounds of pressure, and then once that goes on, I'll watch this gauge and I'll listen to the jiggle. I think I want, I can't remember how many jiggles per minute, but I use the gauge more than I use the weight to help me out there. As long as there's a constant jiggle, then we're good. And so it'll get up to 10 pounds. You can go 12 and that's not gonna hurt it. I don't like to go anything over that. I'll have to gauge the heat on the stove to adjust that. But it needs to be at a constant 10 pounds of pressure for 20 minutes for pint-sized jars. If you did this in quart-sized jars, you'd wanna do 25 minutes. So oftentimes I do an extra minute or 2 just to be safe. All right, so it's been a few minutes, and I'm not sure if you can see. It's been a few minutes. I can see steam coming out steadily. It's hard to pick up on the camera, but I'm gonna go ahead and put the gauge on, or the weight on. So it's on the 10 pounds. And I'm gonna wait for it to come up to pressure now. Okay, so it's getting there, not quite. You can see that my dial is just about at 10, but you can hear and see my weight is not jiggling yet. So it's not quite ready. It's not time to start the timer. It'll start jiggling and bumping here anytime now. Okay, now we're there. So there's a constant jiggle. You may get a brief pause, but it's going to pick right back up. You can see the gauge is at 10 pounds of pressure. So I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And just let it go. So I am just keeping an ear on this. I'm going about doing other things, washing dishes, rotating laundry, picking up, doing some odd chore things. I'm not running outside to do anything. I'm staying within earshot of the canner to make sure I can still hear that jiggle. I'm also going to go ahead and turn my heat down a little bit because the pressure is still rising. Once it gets up, I always start it on high. Once it gets up to pressure, I usually turn it down to medium. If I'm canning something that takes a long time, like meat, for example, or something that takes like an hour and a half, then usually I can get it down to a medium low and it still holds the same pressure. So that's it. I've got about 19 minutes. Okay, I'm going to feed my sourdough. Canner's still going, so that's the noise you hear. This is my sourdough starter. You can see it's good and bubbly. Actually, I'm overdue to feed it. So I am going to start by, I have a discard jar that I've been saving up and discard in. I'm going to start by dumping off about half of this. It smells so good. I love the smell of sourdough. I had a funny moment. We had sourdough with our dinner 2 nights ago, and my oldest son is still not quite used to it. I don't make it a whole lot. I use it more in some other things. I'll make small batches, more for myself than for my family. He likes cheap, plain, store-bought white bread for a sandwich. So this was just straight sourdough. I've been adding like honey and oats and things like that to kind of mask the sourdough flavor. And he has liked that okay, but I didn't in this particular batch. It was just your flour, starter, water, salt. And we're eating dinner and he says, why is this bread so sour? We all giggled at him because it's sourdough. This is kind of fun. So, okay, this is my starter. This goes back to the fridge. I will use that in probably some pancakes coming up. And then I'm going to go ahead, my jar is kind of funky. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a clean jar. Okay, so my sourdough I am finding really likes freshly ground wheat. So I have some hard white wheat in here ground out just a little bit. I don't need a whole. I'm not really good at measuring, but I'm going to use a measuring cup for the sake of not dumping out the rest of my flour. So this is a 1/4 cup. This is going to be about a 1/2 cup. This is just water that I have used as a place filler in my canner when I canned something, probably green beans. You can use your tap water if it's not chlorinated, city municipal system. If you have a well, I use my tap water all the time. I'm actually going to have to use my tap water now because that was not enough water. So this is real thick. I kind of like it more like a thick pancake consistency. Just scrape the bottom, scrape the sides, make sure it all gets mixed in. Okay, so you want to let this breathe. You can just set a lid on here without screwing it on tight so that it can still bubble out. I like to use coffee filters. I'm going to do that. You can put a rubber band on here. I'm going to just use a canning ring that fits to hold that on so that can breathe. And then this will sit on my shelf where it'll catch my eye as I'm walking by doing other chores. I can remember, oh, I need to feed my sourdough, or I need to use that up. I need to start bread, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a constant reminder, which is good if you're doing sourdough. It can kind of be a nagging thing if you're not. Okay. So the only thing I'm going to do is turn off the canner, or turn off the burner to the canner. So I'm just going to let it sit. The pressure is going to naturally drop down. You'll start to see that pretty quickly. As soon as it gets down to underneath 10, this is going to stop. I do not take this off. Leave your weighted gauge on there. We're not going to try and reduce the pressure down to 0. We just let it sit. So I happen to have somewhere to go this evening, so I'll just let this sit probably until tomorrow morning. So you can see the gauge has come down under 10. So the weight is not jiggling anymore. It's still making just like a steady release of steam sound. I can hear the canner boiling inside. So again, I'm just gonna let this sit. I'm not gonna touch it. I'm not gonna take the weight off. I'm not gonna try to plan to open it. I could let this sit for an hour or so and then take the lid off and remove the cans, but I don't need to do that today. If I had a bunch going on, I might. I'm just gonna open this up in the morning. It may actually still be warm on the inside in the morning. That is going to be a good 15 hours away from right now. So that's how hot it gets in there. And then I'll take a damp cloth and wipe down all the jars, remove the rings, and just, you want those cans to sit for 12 to 24 hours anyways. So I'll let them sit for probably the rest of the day tomorrow and before I put them up. And just make sure that you label your jars. I'm gonna write beef, I'm gonna write today's date on them, and get them put up on the shelf.